Hello, Dr. Shiva.
Hi, Tiana.
I'm excited to ask you a few questions. I think we can start with Navdanya, which you founded in 1987. And I'm wondering if you can tell us what prompted you to found that organization and what exactly Navdanya does.
The word Navdanya actually got added only in 91. I just called it the seed saving movement when I started in 87. And I started the seed saving movement because I was invited to a meeting in Geneva on the new emerging biotechnologies. There was no GMO product in the world at that time, but the chemical industry was seeking to do genetically modified seeds. So I got invited for the agriculture part of the dialogue. What do technologies do beyond what we assess them to do? And at this meeting, the industry, which doesn't have a single GMO in its hands, is saying we will do genetic engineering because the tools are available of recombinant DNA. And we'll do it because this will allow us to claim that we have invented life and take patents on life and collect royalties from seed. And I always say for them, GMO meant God move over. They also said that the US and Europe were too small a market. So they had to get the global market. And to do this, they had to create an international treaty to impose patents on seed all over the world on the last farmer. And they said, we have to make sure that no farmer saves seeds. We have to make sure this law prevents farmers from having their own seed freedom and seed sovereignty. I said, but we have a duty to save seeds. Seed is not your invention. And I thought of Gandhi, I thought of the spinning wheel and how he brought down the empire, the cotton empire, with the little spinning wheel. And I said, what is the spinning wheel of today? In this period where it's not a cotton empire, but an empire over life itself. And the seed came to me. And I started saving seed. I've had contact with communities like the women of Chipko who hugged the trees in the 70s. I went back to them. I said, you have seeds, start saving them. We started to grow them out. And then when I would say we have 300 varieties of rice, people would say it can't be. And I say, native varieties can produce more. And they said, can't be. So I started the farm as a conservation center to show. I call it the farm that tells you that can be is the world of life, of its abundance, its diversity. So I was doing seed collections in southern India. And there was this area where a bandit called Veerappan, the sandalwood smuggler, was so ferocious he'd kept everyone out, all the government people out, no police, no extension agents of government. So there was no chemicals and there was lots of diversity. And I'm in this field of a tribal, for seed collection, and I start counting the crops he's grown. He's grown 9 crops in one field. And I said, wow, you've grown 9 crops. And he said, yes, Navdanya. I said, you talk as if there's a meaning. He says, don't you know? You're a PhD. And I said, no, I don't. And he then gave me this most amazing discourse that has been a guiding light for me. He said, the 9 planets, because in India we have the 7 planets and 2 shadow planets for the accurate calculations. So the 9 planets, the 9 crops in my field, and the balance in our bodies is one continuum of harmony, of cosmic harmony. It is my duty to protect diversity. That's what Navdanya is. I said, okay, seed saving becomes Navdanya now onwards. And that's how the movement was grown. So it's centered on life.
Yeah.
And as the beautiful Thich Nhat Hanh saying says, I am in love with Mother Earth. Biodiversity is her expression. So I'm in love with all the diversity she's given us. And I'm ferociously dedicated to protecting the last seed. That's what Navdanya does.
That's so beautiful, Dr. Shiva. And it reminds me of something I've heard you say before about the monoculture of the mind. And it seems that the more that we narrow what we grow, what we eat, almost our mindset becomes more narrow. So there seems to be a direct correlation of course, biodiversity on the earth, all that we grow and have our hands touch and take into our bodies, and diverse thinking, right?
Right. So, I actually wrote that book, Monocultures of the Mind, because I'd done the work to help Chipko on issues of forestry. And my eyes could tell me that a natural forest produced more. It produced more diversity, it produced more diversity of wood, of food, of herbs, of water, of soil. And yet those forests were called unproductive. And they were converted into these monoculture plantations. And then I looked at what happened to Punjab, and we were told the green revolution and chemicals were more productive, they'd feed the world, they increased the yields. But I could see the fields of Punjab were impoverished monocultures of just rice in one season and wheat in another. And on the terraces of the Himalaya from where I come, in those little gravelly fields, women were growing 12 crops and 7 crops and 9 crops in abundance. And my eyes could tell me that diversity produces more and monocultures are impoverished. I said, what is it that creates this blindness to see diversity and to see the abundance diversity creates? And so I wrote the book, Monocultures of the Mind, because it is a blindness, it is a myopia. And the monocultures of the mind, which for me began with understanding how we can clear cut the most beautiful forests, including right now this madness in Brazil to chop down the lungs and livers of the planet to grow GMO soybean. The Amazon has been handed over from the Ministry of Environment to the Ministry of Agriculture to promote GMO soybean. So I tell everyone who says plant-based diet in a blind way, I said GMO soya in the Amazon is not saving the planet, not protecting your health. It's Roundup sprayed, and it's robbed the planet of its ability to have a lung and to clear and clean the systems. But I feel today, this monoculture of the mind is what applies to the hate that is spreading like a very lethal virus in all our societies. I know there's a tendency in the US to think it's only happening to us, but it's happening everywhere because it is the shadow of a greed economy. An economy of greed goes hand in hand with the politics of hate because the 1% must protect themselves from the unity of love and the unity of justice and the unity of sustainability. So they create all kinds of differences, and a monoculture of the mind becomes very convenient to say there's a superior race, there's a superior religion, there's a superior gender, and the old civilizing mission that allowed the slaughter of 90% of the First Nations of America and the violence against the whole world in the period of colonialism, it was a civilizing mission. The monoculture of the mind in the cultural and social domain becomes a genocide.
Wow. You think about the diversity of human beings on the planet, all different cultures, all different colors, all different languages.
And each of us unique.
Each of us unique.
Each of us unique, and which is why true education is about allowing the flowering of our uniqueness, not about making us cogs in a collapsing machine.
Yes. Fostering the beauty, the unique beauty of each individual.
Exactly.
And there's so much diversity in that. And I really see how it correlates to try to erase that, and make it about one race is superior.
So it's basically a reaction of violence that comes from a deep sense of inferiority.
And Vandana, a fear of people having their own connection to the divine.
Because that is the highest freedom.
Yes.
For one, it's not containable by any chain. Exactly. There's no chain that can bind it.
You can't make money off it either.
Yes, exactly. You can't siphon off money. You can't extract the dollar. You can't build a 1% empire. You can build a oneness of the universe. That's why my new book is called Oneness versus the 1%.
Beautiful. Now, listen, you mentioned the Chipko movement. Some people may not be familiar with what that was. So could you just explain to us that movement and how you were involved?
Well, I have grown up in the Himalayan forests. I've trekked the mountains because in those days there were no roads. There used to be, I think, one road to Badrinath. We used to walk, we used to go on horseback. And I've seen the Himalayan forests in their pristine glory. I decided to do my PhD in the foundations of quantum theory, and in my search, I found out it's Canada that was doing the best work, and the University of Western Ontario had attracted the top people from around the world, from Israel, from South Africa, from Poland. Anyone I wrote to, they said, but we'll be in London, Ontario. So I said, that's where I'm going. So I went to Ontario to do my PhD. I had to do a master's before that because it was an interdisciplinary PhD. And I said, before I leave, I want to just go and do a short trek to carry my home in my heart. And I went off, took a bus. I had a few days before I had to fly to Canada. And I go to this forest, which used to be an oak forest, and it's now apple orchard. And I go down, I walk down to swim in this little stream, and it's only water till my ankles. And I am absolutely distraught. And I said, how can we destroy the earth like this? I didn't know till that moment that we had that capacity. So I'm waiting to take the bus back to Delhi, and I'm sitting in the chai ka dhaba, and I'm talking to the chaiwala, and I'm talking about how disturbed I am. And he says, but there's hope, because CHIPCO has started. And I said, what's CHIPCO? And he talks about women coming out in a remote part of the Himalaya to hug the trees and telling the loggers and the timber industry that you'll have to kill us before you kill the trees. We are going to embrace our forests. And that time I had to fly to Canada. I said, but every vacation I'm coming back. I took a pledge in my mind. And every holiday, winter, summer, I would be a volunteer for CHIPCO. And for me, I am in love with Mother Earth, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, has to be both a living in deep compassion, but it also has to be the love that allows us to put ourselves between destruction and what we love. That's why Gandhi's Satyagraha, the force of truth, was an ultimate expression in women hugging the trees. It was a satyagraha. It was the truth of their oneness with the forest and the dependence on the forest that said, we will give our lives, but we will not allow our forest to be destroyed. And we are in a moment where for the entire earth, each of us is being called to hug the earth. Each of us is being called to do a satyagraha for life.
Thank you for saying force of truth, because sometimes I feel very angry when I see the destruction and the greed at play here on Earth, and I want to be sure that I'm using that anger in a constructive way as a battery pack to fuel my activism. And I think it's force of truth that really, is the way to go, right? When you are fueled by the truth and aligned with the cosmos.
Absolutely. So satyagraha is the word Gandhi gave, this force of truth. Satya is truth, agra is the force. And he practiced it against apartheid and the division by race in South Africa. He practiced it against the compulsory cultivation of indigo at that time in the British Empire. He practiced it against the banning of making salt by Indians because they wanted a salt monopoly. So we practice it on the forest with CHIPCO, on the seed. I've done a seed satyagraha from the day I heard the corporation say, we will own the seed. My life is a satyagraha for the seed. And I think, because of this Cartesian mind, you've got a monoculture of the mind, but it's also linked to the mechanistic mind. And it has artificially separated us from the earth. And then all of the epistemology of reductionism goes crazy. How do we connect back to the earth? How do we know? We know because we are part of the earth. Truth is living. And if only we could shed the fossilized mindset that grew out of the fossil fuel era, as well as the colonizing idea of a superior race, and begin again. Re-begin, I call it. We've got to re-begin as human beings who are part of the earth. And then the force of truth will align itself. Because what will guide us is the universe, is the cosmos, is Gaia, is our communities, is our societies, is our love, is our compassion.
Well, good. See, this is my next question, is we used to be aware that we are the earth, but then something happened.
Colonization separated people, but it didn't need to say we are not part of the earth. It had to just take the territories of people. But the epistemology of nature being dead, of us being conquerors and masters and owners, was constructed with the finding of fossil fuels and the thinking that now we can be free of nature. And I remember in my book, Staying Alive, in my last chapter, the Chipko movement had received the Alternative Nobel Prize, something I've also received later. But that same year, the Nobel Prize for Economics went to a fellow called Robert Solow. Robert Solow says, history is a linear progress, from agriculture to industry to service, etc. And there's nothing like scarcity of natural resources. We cannot destroy the earth because we are so superior to the earth, we'll always find a substitute. And that's why they destroy our minds and they say we'll have artificial intelligence. They destroy our food and they'll say we'll have synthetic food and fake milk and fake meat and we'll call ourselves vegan. No, this artificiality that is a separation from our natural interconnectedness is what we've to overcome. And then the rest falls into place.
Vandana, why don't we recognize all that we have, all that we are given? We actually don't need to create artificial anything because the Garden of Eden, if you want to call it that, is here on earth for us. Food is a way that God speaks to us.
So, Tiana, there is a clear choice that we face as humanity. And when I say humanity, I would say 90% of humanity wants to live in nonviolence and compassion. And that's why everywhere indigenous people are being shot dead, because they're saying, this is Mother Earth. We will not allow you to destroy Mother Earth.
No, of course not.
They are at the front lines. In my time, at the time of the Chipko movement, women weren't shot dead. Today, if you're a native of the Amazon, you're being killed. If you are a tribal in the heart of India saying, this forest is my mother, you are being shot dead. So the war against the earth has become really intense. And anyone who's defending the earth is part of this violence. But the tiny 1% elite and a tiny bit of those who'd rather be their servants and think this is their freedom, that the chains of slavery are their liberation to the next step of another million made on the stock market or a little more money made by looting somebody else. We have a clear choice. This choice of the future being driven by the 1%, which so clearly is leading us to collapse. It has created a war. It has destroyed the land. It has destroyed the climate. It has destroyed our water systems. It has wiped out biodiversity, 90% cultivated diversity, 80% wild diversity, destroyed for a food system that's taking away 95% of our health. And with our health, not just the health of our body, but our mind, because the neurological problems are so intimately connected to a poisoned diet. So we'll either have a dead and poisoned planet within 100 years, no food, or we can regenerate the Garden of Eden. It'll either be a garden or an unlivable hell where we have no place either. We can't keep driving other species to extinction and expect the human being to be so superior and so isolated from the web of life that with rotten food, with infertile soils, with not a seed to grow, with no knowledge in our minds, we're going to have food. No, we won't. So the choice is clear, and the beauty of it is everyone can garden. The littlest child in a kindergarten school can be a gardener. That's why we've started a program in Navdanya called Gardens of Hope. The problems are big, they're planetary, but the solutions are in the small. But if everyone engaged in that little bit that they can do, we've got a planetary solution.
Okay, so many things in what you just said I want to unpack a little bit more. There's research being done right now that links dead food, let's call it processed food, to an increase in violence.
Yes.
So as you were touching on, if people are eating, let's say Doritos, they're not going to be thinking in a way that is connected to the earth, because eating fresh food from the earth connects us to the divine and allows us to think clearly and know clearly how we need to be proceeding as humanity.
Well, we have a rainforest within. We are only 10% human. The rest of us is microbes in our gut.
10% human only.
Only 10% human, 100 trillion microbes according to some assessments. They're still figuring out how much. It's a forest inside, and an amazingly self-organized forest of diversity. We need to nourish our gut with the diversity outside, because each microbe and its sensors are tuned to a very particular taste that comes from diversity. Now, we can fool ourselves on supermarket shelves with all the fake labels, but our gut can't be cheated. Truth resides in our gut. And now they're finding out that most neurological activity doesn't take place in the upstairs of the human body, in the so-called brain. That A, every cell is intelligent.
Yes.
And B, the biggest neurological activity is taking place in our gut, which is why it's called the enteronervous system, the second brain. Now, grandmothers used to tell us, Jaisa anna, vaisa man. Your mind is what you eat. And if you eat violent food, you're going to have a violent mind. If you eat compassionate food, you're going to have a compassionate mind. That's being verified now by the capacity of science to figure out with a microscope how much richness there is within and how intelligent that richness is. That last microbe, its last sensor, knows exactly what you're eating. And there's a war going on inside our gut with all the toxics, the processed food. So I think we need to get rid of three things: industrial food produced with chemicals and fossil fuels, industrially processed food produced with chemicals, and synthetic artificial substitutes, including those who think by calling for artificial meat and lab-made milk, they're doing either the planet or themselves a favor. You have to recognize that food is the web of life. As we have in Upanishads, it says, everything is food, everything is something else's food. We are interconnected through food. The nutrient cycle is the fundamental ecological cycle. We've forgotten that. And the minute we reclaim it, we will reclaim our humanity.
Yes. Now you talk about, I think you mentioned the 6 tastes, which brings me to Ayurveda.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that system?
Yeah. So Ayurveda, of course, has evolved over 5,000 years. And now we know our gut microbiome needs a diversity in the diet. The 6 tastes were a way to ensure you're eating diversity, that in every meal you must eat the 6 tastes. Now, by eating the 6 tastes, and not in fake form, but in the way nature gives it, the natural sugar that comes from the sugar cane, or the fruits, or the palm jaggery, the targur, the delicious coastal area sugar. You need the sugar, you need the sweet, you need the salt, you need the astringent, you need the sour, you need the bitter. Now, the Western scientists couldn't figure out why on earth would we need bitter. They haven't eaten karela, the bitter gourd. They haven't eaten a chutney with neem leaves. They haven't eaten all of this. The curry patta is a little bitter. We knew we have to eat bitter. It's part of the balance of the diet. And on the New Year of southern India, particularly Karnataka and Maharashtra, which is called Gudi Padwa in Maharashtra and is called Ugadi in Karnataka, one of the dishes they serve is neem flowers with a little bit of jaggery, the bitter and the sweet together, because that's what life is. There's an artisanal white sugar, it's called bura. And I used to just love it with a little bit of ghee rolled in a chapati or with rice. Just bura. It's highly sophisticated to make. And every time people say, but it can't be done, I said, but if I ate it as a child, surely it was done. Let's find a grandmother or a grandfather who still remembers. That's how we've reclaimed so much of the knowledge. And we have at Navdanya, we have an Earth University where we teach basically how to live at the end of time and re-begin. And the Earth University has courses. One of our courses is called the Grandmothers Universities, the simple art of living. Because Aristotle had said oikonomia is the art of living. What we call economy today is robbery. He called it chromatistics, the art of money making. It's brilliant in money making, but pathetic in living.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just bad life for all those guys who jump off the whichever floor in Wall Street because they lost on stocks that day. It's miserable lives for those who are being robbed of their life, including all the other species. It is really now, in my view, this 1% rule is not a brilliant system of the economy, it's a criminal system of the ecology. In the ecological system and in the social assessment, it's a criminal activity. And that's why we have to join together in a satyagraha for our times.
Join together in a satyagraha. Yes.
And the truth today is the truth of life. That we are alive, we can defend life. We can turn it around from collapse to regeneration.
Yes, as long as we keep our microbiome diverse with those 6
And our
tastes.
minds. And our minds.
And our minds. Then we will be connected and knowing the right thing to do.
Exactly. So monoculture of the mind has brought us this dead end. The diversity of the mind will bring respect for all life.
You talk about yield not being measured in how many pounds of produce one might grow, but in how much nutrition is provided. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Way back when I realized with the monoculture of the mind, a very impoverished farming system was being called higher production. And I got deeper into it. What were they measuring in terms of productivity? They were measuring yield as the output and labor as the input. So any technology to destroy farmers is considered a productive technology. That's why spraying Roundup just increases productivity, even though it kills all life in your farming systems. And in terms of output, any farm has soil, and a more fertile soil should be its output. Good water should be its output. Pollinators should be its output. Meaningful work should be its output. Healthy food should be its output. What do we measure? The mass of a nutritionally empty, toxic commodity. The yield is a lie. So we started to measure nutrition per acre and health per acre, and we can feed 2 times the world's population by protecting life on Earth, conserving the life in the soil, the life of the insects, including our pollinators, the bees and butterflies who provide 1/3 of the food we eat. We've done these scientific experiments on our farm. We have 6 times more pollinators on the Navdanya farm, and all we did was save the seeds. We weren't a pollinator sanctuary, but saving the seeds of diversity, the pollinators had a home, they had a sanctuary. Our water level has come up 70 feet. Everywhere else in India, it's going down with chemical farming. And our research is now showing that by doing biodiverse organic farming, we are pulling out all the excess carbon and nitrogen that's built up in the atmosphere and is a greenhouse gas, and putting it back through the plants into the soil. We've got a climate solution in all of this. These are all true outcomes. And I feel we've reached the time where we have to say, work in cultivating good, healthy food is the most important work of the future. And it shouldn't be treated as redundant work to be reduced to zero by treating it as an input. There's a lot of talk of the Green New Deal in the United States. Well, the Green New Deal means recognizing that work in growing nourishing food and nourishing the planet is the most important work. There is no other work.